At least 4 people are dead and several more injured after an attack on a church in Michigan. Authorities say a 40-year-old man identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford allegedly drove a vehicle into the church premises and began shooting indiscriminately. Police believe that the suspect started a fire later that then consumed the church, trapping others inside before being extinguished eventually. Here's a report before we go across to my colleague Priyanka Deo, who gets more on this development.
Michigan late Sunday as the gunman opened fire inside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 4 people are confirmed dead, 8 more wounded, as police raced to the scene within 30 seconds of the first 911 call.
There is a couple additional bodies that we've discovered in the church. So that makes our total victim count up to 4 victims. As I said before, there has already been the suspect who is deceased as well. So we have 5 deceased persons from this tragic incident.
The suspect, 40-year-old Thomas Jacob Sanford, was fatally shot by the police inside the church parking lot. Inside the sanctuary, courage took hold as families shielded children and helped each other escape.
Just hundreds of people just practicing their faith. Just extreme courage, brave, and that's the type of community that we are. Law enforcement, again, we were on scene within 30 seconds from that original 911 call. Within 8 minutes, that suspect was neutralized.
Recovery crews searched the debris for unaccounted victims as the fire left the church a total loss.
We've searched multiple churches this evening for bomb threat protocol.
Yes. Is that based on actual threats?
Yes. We received 911 calls about bomb threats or other indications that there was a bomb at a different location. Some of them were churches, and we have responded and cleared those locations.
Tonight, Grand Blanc mourns its loss, but stands united in resilience. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
In Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, a 40-year-old, his name is Thomas Jacob. He's a former Marine of the United States. He drove his truck into a Latter-day Saints church, opened fire on congregants, and then set the building ablaze. Police fatally shot him at the scene. At least 2 people were killed and several others injured. And authorities say that Sanford had no known connection to this church, making this appear random, at least as of now. The attack stands out because it combined multiple methods: vehicle assault, arson, and gunfire. This is a hybrid approach designed to maximize fear. Sanford's military background also raises broader questions about veteran mental health and reintegration. This tragedy does fit a national pattern. In August, one killed 2 children during mass at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. In July, another shooter stormed a Baptist church in Kentucky after killing a state trooper. And overall, the U.S. saw over 580 mass shootings in 2024, with more than 300 already reported this year. When violence targets schools, hospitals, and places of worship, places meant to be safe, it shapes daily American life.
Shift our focus eastwards, where Russia bombarded Ukraine on Sunday in an attack that lasted far more than even 12 hours and killed at least 4 people in capital Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the assault was further evidence of the need for more international sanctions on Moscow and to in fact cut off its energy revenues last week. He warned world leaders that Russia is preparing to attack another European country. Meanwhile, NATO remains on high alert. The alliance has launched fighter jets during Russia's latest strikes on Kyiv. Here's Zelensky for you.
Сьогодні весь день після російського удару тривала ліквідація наслідків у Запоріжжі, в Києві, Київській області, в інших наших регіонах. Більшість уражень – це звичайні будинки, це цивільні об'єкти. Постраждали більш ніж 80 людей. На жаль, 4 людини загинули, і серед них 1 дитина.
Well, my colleague Vishal Vivek joins us for more. Vishal, we heard Zelensky there another strike by Russia. What's the Ukrainian president vying to play at now? We've in the recent past, only seen Poland and Romania, in fact, scrambling jets to respond to Russian aggression, so-called alleged Russian aggression. What is exactly Zelensky batting for here? And will more sanctions really help Russia? First of all, will they even be imposed, given the current diplomatic and this and the international scenario that persists?
Well, Arjun, the president of Ukraine is clearly asking for more sanctions on Russia. It remains to be seen how much those sanctions that are already in place, how much they have actually affected Russia, because Russia's economy continues to flourish. We've all seen that in the time that the war has happened, Russian economy has actually benefited. So whether the sanctions that are in place, they have had any effect on Russia or not, that is also to be debated. So that is why the Ukrainian president is highlighting that there needs to be more sanctions on Russia so that Russia could feel the pressure, because it's clearly not feeling it, as is evidenced by the series of strikes on Russia, on Ukrainian soil. More than 500 drones this time, close to 600 drones and missiles were launched on the Ukrainian soil. And in the recent past, we've also seen that a lot of these attacks have been aimed at Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Kyiv had somewhat, evaded the damage from the Russian war in the last 3 years, but that is not the case anymore. We have seen so many attacks on the heartland of Ukraine that seem to have affected civilians. At this time, a 12-year-old girl on the Ukrainian side was killed. So that goes to show the level of precision these Russian weapons have. So it remains to be seen how the world, the West, the allies of the US, they respond to this, because the US is clearly not happy with what is happening on the ground, because Russian president had reportedly told President Trump that he would be thinking about a trilateral meeting, but that has not happened, and there's not even talk of a meeting between Russian president and the Ukrainian president. That totally seems to be off the table. So it's all going haywire. There doesn't seem to be any solution, and nobody seems to have an answer to these questions.
Well, no immediate answers available there to Zelensky's, repeated requests to NATO and the West to impose further more sanctions on Russia. And as my colleague Vishal Vivek was telling us there, Russia seems to have only benefited from these sanctions that have already been levied on Moscow and the Kremlin. Moving on, we shift our focus to the Middle East now, where the death toll in the Israel-Hamas war has topped 66,000 Palestinians. Gaza's health ministry has released this report on Sunday. That's yesterday. It's just a day before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meets US President Donald Trump. That's later tonight, in just a few hours from now, viewers. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has come under more heavy international pressure to end the war in Gaza. Now, key Western allies have also joined a growing list of countries recognizing a Palestinian state over Israeli objections. The European Union, for instance, is considering sanctions, and there are growing moves to a sports and cultural boycott against Israel as well. Here's more.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is headed to the White House on Monday for a critical meeting with President Donald Trump about the war in Gaza. Trump has given Israel wall-to-wall support since he returned to the White House last January, but there are signs that is beginning to change. Netanyahu is facing growing international pressure and isolation over the devastation in Gaza. In fact, health officials in Gaza say the death toll has now risen above 66,000 people. Trump also himself has begun to show signs of impatience. Arab officials say that Trump is expected to present a new 21-point ceasefire plan. This is a plan that would declare an immediate ceasefire and set in motion a process for ending the war altogether. Now, Netanyahu gave a speech to the United Nations on Friday where he struck a defiant tone. He says Israel is going to push ahead with this offensive until it finishes the job, until it completes its defeat of Hamas. However, if Trump has a plan to end this war, Netanyahu will have a hard time saying no.
Over in Washington, US President Donald Trump met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and their Army Chief Asim Munir at the White House on Thursday. Now, this is where the Pakistani side presented rare earth minerals during talks. However, now a photograph released by the White House showed Trump looking at an open wooden box or a casket of minerals, now just as Munir pointed to the display. while Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif stood nearby, almost grinning. Now, Sharif is the first Pakistani Prime Minister to visit the White House in 6 long years. Islamabad has actually been seeking American investment in its minerals sector. Only earlier this month, Pakistan's Frontier Works Organizations, or the FWO, signed an agreement with Missouri-based US Strategic Metals to establish a polymetallic refinery in Pakistan. Now, a second deal was also signed between Pakistan's National Logistics Corp and Portugal's Mota Engel Group. It's an engineering and construction company. The foreign ministers of North Korea and China met in Beijing on Sunday and agreed to deepen bilateral ties between Beijing and Pyongyang. Now, a video from Phoenix TV showed Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi greeting North Korean counterpart at a Diaspora state guest house. Now, the meeting in Beijing came about 3 weeks after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Chinese President Xi Jinping held their first summit in more than 6 years and also pledged mutual support and enhanced cooperation. Now, Kim and Xi, interestingly, earlier attended a massive Beijing military parade marking the end of the World War II, or marking 75 years of the end of World War II, with other world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, also present. Over in New York, Mayor Eric Adams has announced Sunday that he is ending his campaign for re-election. In a video released on social media, Adams spoke with pride about his achievements as the New York mayor. Now, this also includes a drop in violent crime, as claimed by Adams. But he said that the constant media speculation about his future and also a decision by the city's campaign finance board to withhold public funding from his re-election effort made it impossible to stay in the race. The one-term Democrats' decision to quit the race comes just days after he repeatedly insisted he would stay in the contest, saying every day New Yorkers don't surrender. However, speculation that he would not make it to election day has been rampant for a year together now. Adams' campaign was severely dismissed and wounded by federal bribery case and liberal anger over his warm relationship with President Donald Trump. Now, in Southeast Asia, heavy rain and strong winds from Typhoon Bualoi, now weakened into a tropical storm, flooded roads, knocked off roofs and caused at least 9 deaths in central Vietnam before it weakened to a storm that moved Monday into Laos, state media reported. Now, the storm tore through communities, damaging houses, schools and power poles, sweeping away temporary bridges and also flooding roads and low water crossings across several provinces. Flooding in cities, submerged vehicles and many highland communities were also cut off. State media, meanwhile, says rescue teams were searching for 17 missing fishermen. Forecasters in Vietnam said that at 10 a.m. local time Monday, the storm center was overland near the border of Nang Yeon province in Laos, with winds of 46 meters per hour blowing. They also added that it would push deeper into central Laos. Another day of protests and clashes with the police took place on Sunday in Lima, with the Peruvian capital, where young groups protested against President Dina Boluarte's government and Congress for their lack of response to the escalating violence, especially extortion and murders that plague the country. Hundreds of demonstrators from youth organizations calling themselves Generation Z clashed with the police in night in the vicinity of Congress, in the very center of capital Lima. There they were repelled by uniformed officers. As you see on your screen, they were lined up with shields and helmets and also threw tear gas bombs until the protesters were forced to retreat to the nearby San Martin Square. Now, for the second consecutive night, the young people tried to remove the metal fences and barriers protecting Peru's Congress.